Okay, so are you going to start?
Go ahead, did you press start?
I pressed show my screen, so I need to press something else.
Cindy, we're still on hold. Show my screen.
So my screen should
Start
be...
back. Good morning, everyone on the webinar. We are really excited that you're here with us. Bending over backwards, the use on ITS projects. We're in the room, in the facility, Redondo Beach, California. And so we'll get started in just a moment or two.
Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Transportation webinar, Highways Administration and Working Group. This is our webinar on bending over backwards, the use of Agile systems engineering on ITS projects. We're really excited to have you here. Thank you for coming. We have a good number of people, about 20 people in the room. Around 60 people on the line, and I can see that number ticking. So we have a lot of interest here. My name's Simon Smith. I'm the co-chair of the Transportation Work within INCOSE.
Okay. Attendees, can you hear us again? Question box, it worked out great. If you can hear us, please. Yes, good, back on.
Okay, so did nobody hear any of these?
It was just
okay.
a few seconds.
Okay, all right, good. That's our only technology failure. Good, okay, so we'll agenda for this morning. I'm Simon Smith. Two other people who've been really key to the organisation. Jen Caesar from Stella, EB. Jen, the moderator for the questions. Just give a quick overview of how that's going to be.
Absolutely. So we're looking to make this a really close with the large number of people that we and with our attendees on the broadcast. As you've heard from Simon's introduction, it's going to be broken into 3 sections. There's an introduction, review, and then the Agile practices. In between, we will stop for a short 5-minute to have some questions and answers. What we'll do during your questions in the questions pane, and then What we want to do then is keep moving forward and allow about 20 minutes at the end of for some engagement and discussion with our colleagues on the. In that time, you may use the questions button. Give you a little bit of heads up that we're going to be in question, and then we will unmute your mic. You may be able to ask your question. Everyone will be we'll only unmute one person at a time to mitigate that may be associated with people listening in various areas. There are those two functions. There's a hand raise to webinar. Use that, and I'll be able to answer your questions, technology questions or technological questions in the, and then we'll be able to have discussion afterwards.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, section one of the webinar this morning. An introduction from myself to INCOSE working group. Start with an overview of INCOSE. This is in particular on the phone. INCOSE is the International Council. It's a membership body to the sharing, promotion, and advancement of engineering. We have around 8,000 members worldwide. INCOSE is primarily broken in chapters, and I will cover off the working groups and chapters. Next slide. INCOSE runs every summer. There's an international symposium. Summer it's in Edinburgh, in Scotland. There's an international workshop, which is the event that we're today, and the chapter of local events where they're based. INCOSE also produces a number of products. To draw your attention to two key ones, which I think may be of interest. First is the INCOSE system, which was recently updated for version 4. That's a handbook giving an overview of this based on the ISO standard 15288. Another one you may find in the BOK, or body of knowledge, a body of knowledge that's available online. Finally, also certifies as systems engineer, so they have a number of, which is the CSET. I'm a CSET, for example, systems engineering professional. So if you're interested in becoming certified as an expert, place to do that. Working groups are broken primarily in sectors, be those transport, or infrastructure, or automotive, or healthcare. Technical working groups, for example, requirement working group that we're co-hosting with this one today, being engineering, to give some examples, and geographic. So there are three main: Americas, Europe, Middle East, Asia, Oceania. Within those three sectors, there are local chapters. For example, chapter state, I believe. So let's talk a little bit about working group. The transportation working group is dedicated to the advancement and promotion of ground transportation systems. So some of the areas we focus in, and this is by no means an exclusive list, but just to give you a sense, control center systems, rail and transit systems, and highway. And we're not just interested in the technology system, we're also interested in systems around those things, procurement processes. How do you actually move life cycles to make them successful? The transport products, which we have our SE 101, essentially introductions to. They're about 6 pages long, short, snappy introduction. Those are on our website. The active LinkedIn group, around 600 people on the LinkedIn group. Webinars, we aim to run about 4 webinars a year, of which this is the first one of the year, so we're delighted to get started. of systems engineering case studies. These are real-life examples that has been applied in transportation around. We have 15 of those so far, and those are growing. This year, we aim to release a newsletter to our, as you can see there, the TWG Times is the name. Just to finish out then, the working group has a steering committee of the working group. And we have committees broken into a number of functional. So we have, that's myself, Dale and Nita, who we have outreach, we have member services, administration, and then industry. So the industry liaisons represent the voice of those industries back into the TWG. Transit, supplier, academic, and government. Just to give you live people involved in this working group, our lovely headshots. We introduced 2 brand new positions, one on the government lead, and we are actively seeking people who may be. So please come and talk to one of us later if you. 4 links that you. These Jesse sent these out to all of you last night. You can look at these at your. There's a lot of information there, so take your time to look through those. We do have a TWG YouTube channel. The intention is to upload the recording of this webinar YouTube channel. To the Jesse Glazer of FHWA.
And Jen, are we okay on the?
Yep.
Okay, good.
See you. You can wait.
Okay. I can't see myself, but coming across well. Before I begin, I want to give a word of thanks to my INCOSE colleagues who I'm in preparing this and in tailoring it. Primarily ITS engineers and primarily INCOSE folks here. We're focused on the emerging role of Agile software development processes for ITS projects. We are not here to sell any particular point of view, but rather to expose everybody, colleagues on the webinar, to some new methods that are emerging that may have importance in our ITS work. Recognize we have 2 separate audiences here, folks mostly on the webinar, and INCOSE folks mostly. There's a short agenda, and we'll cover them in due course, but recognize they're primarily targeted to one or the other shown on the chart here. Let's begin with the question, well, yes, kind of level set everybody on the short answer I like to give is it's technology in transportation. The US DOT definition is electronics communication being used to improve the efficiency or safety of surface transportation system. That's the Code of Federal Regulations, as you see on the screen. Excludes boats, planes, freight, rail operations, but on a road or a street. And these do apply to essentially all federally. So this it was written about 20 years ago. It covers almost so much as a smartphone, and very broad definition, perhaps a little too broad. But a little bit about the role in ITS projects. Is a funding role, and We also oversee compliance with the 23 CFR, which you'll hear more about and others. So in playing those roles about the Agile processes to be used, the state departments of transportation play a more, they not only concepts and program the TIP process, but the RFPs for the projects, and then select and manage. And in this particular role, Agile processes as they require them when appropriate. Of course, will play their role. The system involved will be involved in perhaps using Agile process of software, may use it to develop their software, and may use it to develop software that's project specific. So can play a role in areas depending on the role. A very brief the history of ITS now. So I've taken a 50-year retro, and I think it's typified by the two cars. These are 50 years ago, and now shape and size of the cars didn't change when you look at them, but what changed 50 years ago, technology was a tiny automobiles. Nowadays, by some estimates, it's more than 50% of the automobile is in primarily electronics and heavily in, some say software is the biggest piece of that. So moving over those 50 years, we evolved from these arterial tracks, the big thing, mostly hardware in the field. In the 80s, free came in, a more complex hardware, increasing amount. 1990s, traffic management centers came, more hardware, more communication, more the transit systems became technology, thousands with a lot of equipment on, or increasing software. Thousands, travel information also emerged and started to play a big role in software and some field devices. We're into electronic, high occupancy toll lanes, lot of hardware, and a lot of software as well. So nowadays, the big thing, of course, is, and if you stop and think about it, that's essentially all, there's very, very little hardware, mobile apps, and it seems everything in ITS now has mobile apps involved. You can see we've evolved from practice to heavily software. Almost software is playing a bigger role, and is that ITS is higher levels of integration across modes, agencies, and users. Rapid technology, more on mobile, cloud, etc. Big data, to change and very rapidly, so we have to be prepared for that change. The software requirements as a result are complex, and a key thing is there's much greater and unpredictability than 40 or dealing with a few field devices over which we had complete control to do. So the question then is software development for the traditional and performance that the paradigms of good software development as well, and especially uncertainty. So the conclusion there is that software is critically important to ITS. It has become that way, and so new software methods needed. And I stress may because, again, we're not taking rather an education position. So for everyone on the phone, this is pretty common. You've seen it a lot, and probably most in the room as well. The as you can see, is that the requirements at the beginning and predictable and determined is now becoming less predictable because of the role in most of our systems. Instead of 2 or 3 users, 1,000 or hundreds of thousands of users. And the new technology requirements, both of those make it hard to first requirements in a clear way at the very beginning of the process. So now at the role that Agile software processes can, they hold some promise, getting more feedback to development and allowing it. The icon you've seen, you described by Phyllis in a moment, and much. Final comments here to Phyllis is software important to ITS success. Have to be managed carefully and appropriately. New software methods are available in the ITS world to do this more effectively and more efficiently. This is going to describe these methods, and then Ed with actual examples. So let me point out that she will, to give you a sense about concepts can be used in project. The bike share project is a 3rd generation, which we actually opened in Southern California. What's unique about it is that it's an any-to-any. Put the bike anywhere that somebody left it, drop it off wherever the picture on the left shows. Move around the whole, and you find your bike with a smart website. Go get it, and lock it up somewhere else. Any system, and I just chart here. So typically, last mile recreational use. It's finding uses in a lot of ways. The thing is, there's a lot of technology on these bikes. It's surprising. GPS to track them, cellular to allow and to allow check-in by an RFID card, solar charged batteries, that's integrated with all the onboard systems. So technology on these bikes. So this project, and so Phyllis, example for those in phone and in the room, architecture oriented. This is architecture for that bike share in the framework. So she's going to first is software, and then the whole of the system Agile development a little different from in the traditional. That I'll turn. Thank you.
While we're doing the hand questions, you can use the question box and questions in the room also. Anybody has any?
Okay. Thank you for that introduction. I'm happy to be to you what Agile really mean, what's kind of the industry technology used, and I just picture in the corner I couldn't resist because this was titled "Bending Over Back." The cover of the Inside Journal from July, and the describe in this presentation journal if you want more information. So, I've to you the current state systems, more software intensive, and some are, many of these projects involve public plus new services, predictable, Agile practices, complexity and change for systems that are not fully predictable, and that you anticipate knowledge of the system you're developing. System engineering, the process may be used, but it's not some of these projects. presentation, I'll talk in more detail about the session is widely adopted for many software projects, and the Agile practices were really formally defined in 2000 by a group of about 17 people at a conference and they emphasized focusing on people in it were documentation and working over requirements documentation. So I'm more in detail what. So you can see Jesse described. I'll be making between Agile practice, but you can see sequential where of operations requirements and implementation, software coding, hardware, bottom of the V in general, right side into testing, verification, validation. So essentially, you know, just a high-level comparison of the definition of what it is you're building, and that is included in with essentially you have a vision and a modular key to be incrementally. So there is now in some have a full, and that's appropriate for in development and transportation. This is represented by this stacked kind of big items that we call a product backlog. Presented as a big block because it's kind of feature or case developed, but there's not the how are you going to do that's kind of so then in development, maintenance, and upgrades to products fielded can do, and that's represented of the V. You can iteratively and incrementally where you have working software and supporting documentation or development, depending on whether you're doing new developments or maintaining something you've already delivered. Detail as to what that really means, kinds of things. The details and words that Jesse just showed you, I years ago, but Wikipedia backlog is the of effort. You then go detailed iteration backlog. It's a short period of 2 to 4 weeks. Some people have a sprint into system engineering iteration because that has more community. You might hear people work. So sprints and iterations are, and then every day meeting, and that's what that 20 is meant to represent. All being at the end of your iteration, you're producing a working increment. It could be software, it could be software, it could be a demonstration, prototype, or a model, depending on the development cycle. Scrum, the is technology for project management, software development, a type of software. And I just want to point out that it's project management, but more than project. It is also not only Scrum, it reduces waste, reduce your work, and have what you need. Once an item is finished, that item that's in work, start another one. It includes, which is we recommend in aerospace, which I come from, but you in automated testing, test for, and common code base is also code. You don't have just one person maintain that code. By following coding it's checked into the repository. And Crystal Methods is on in software. I'm actually not that, but the process includes reflective improvement, side-by-side programming, burn chart, configuration management, and all built into practices. And I know the community is starting to lean Agile because principles are really the Agile process. Yes. So in the beginning area, of course, you have to have a vision of and a roadmap. By roadmap, we mean short iterations of work. How first, what do you want to do? So sometimes that is kind of hard to do. Examples of visions is Speed. It's a project that Joe and he wanted a prize to build a car and applied these concepts today on really designing a car and competing in this. So his vision was, we'll get 100 miles to the gallon, miles per hour, and he accomplished that using all across the world. It's an impressive story. If you're interested, you can find it on wikispeed.org. Really fortunate enough to have Joe in Seattle building a car, planning to take to the called in Europe. Another example of a vision, intelligent transportation systems and manage bike transport, enhance safety, efficiency, and to reduce negative environmental impact. That's kind of a broad, covers a lot of that, and bike sharing accomplished. Worked with a number of companies. You say, well, oh, that's what we're doing. Get it down, and it's how that conversation clarify and crystallize. So I really cannot value of having a really clear. So product backlog. After you've got your vision, now backlog together. A list of. So that's kind of a general phrase. I've worked with a development, and it's your domain. The product in more detail of what that means. Responsible for that product back. You want to price stuff by the highest, and a group of stakeholders. John was for the for integrating multiple, and we holders information local one as well personnel in the field that were network managers. They're conflicting, so we had in the consideration. Product owner is the team who makes that the team is not each other. So here's an example project implemented by the city of Santa Quila, for example. The service should be short-term, any-to-any bike rent. You can pick it up at the city. The hardware are available. Cellular power available. This is an example of perhaps project, and here could be a definition of a beginning backlog. So you want to use, you want GPS tracking and mapping, database, and bicycles. So you want to be able to buy yourself. You don't want a long lead times. So, and common that be very high level a definition and detail to it, and you want your team trades to pick the best. So then you go into iteration planning. Iteration planning is a very to engage all workers. What is the best to start with? So you want to commit, and that is represented by the vertical and identify capability that, and some in the minimum viable product, something demonstratable to get that feedback right track. An example of that, let's say this high-level capability and break out these functional requirements for this list. You want to provide registration and account, and here's some specific. You want to track and display mobile apps. You want to provide checkout and check-in, bike unit RFID reader. Use that with our credit cards. So you might get into this meeting and say, well, should we build a little bit of fun in these areas, or should we just focus on one time? And for knowledge workers to really help you to forward. So you finish one significant capability at a time, which thinking. I think that's quickly demonstrated. Our 2-week sprints, let's just find that you need to do 4 or 5 of them, something demonstrable. In the we would increment or phase box, and the value of time. You don't get into that analysis, which many engineers can do. Keep thinking about it and doing more research. You have a time when you know you're going to demonstrate on so far, so it kind of to if you're doing a trade study, for instance, highest valuable thing, and then build something. So the iteration planning at this point identifies the highest priority environmental constraints are important to include from, and I'll talk more about that in charts, but have attributes, for instance, if you've got availability requirements and performance requirements and things like that. Your architect or system engineer defines architectural requirements. If you've got, operating system requirements, or the architect showed you, one of the keys being able to develop incrementally architecture where you're using standard interfaces and standard design patterns, so you're not that your components are somewhat interchangeable. So the team looks at the highest priority items on the product backlog and plans in the next 2 to 4 week increments or iterations. So they define which of the high priority in the iteration being planned. And this is not uncommon to a planning session. I want all of this done, but by the time planning, they can only do this much. And the value in that session is that conversation and the clear understanding of, if you want in 2 weeks, we can do this, but the best is you're going to get that feedback track. Is this working the way I expect? So the team, the team identifies dependencies between one of the lean practices. Start an item of work until you have everything. So if there's dependencies, you determine what should I do first. An agreement is that no stakeholders can change the planned work during the iteration. It's really key. We're in my industry, shoulder tapping. No, oh, by the way, or could you just stop that? So when you plan, you stick to that plan. You've got something demonstrable, and if the 2 weeks, you then look at the next 2-week plan. And huge value in when week plan and they stick to it. So the daily stand-up ceremony in Agile practice, the team gets together where they, this is what I just finished, this is what I'm going to do. Oh, by the way, I can't finish what I'm working on, I've got an impact that could be slowing you down or is in the way of finishing. The Scrum Master of the team facilitates the daily stand to remove impediments. The product owner also might be needed, and it should last 15 minutes or less, and I have been in daily stand-ups that are, so once you really get what you're working on, and you're out to the Scrum Master, you're reporting. I've been in meetings where someone said, oh, I've got this problem, encountered it and fixed it, and they share that information very quickly. It's very powerful team building exercise too. It helps your team from each other so that they're all more. So at the end of your 2 weeks, you have a demonstration. It presents what it's just finished. Now, we recommend that you don't for this. You show your work. If you're doing, you show the requirements in the. If you've built a model, if you've written code, you write it. The stakeholders feedback on what's just been demonstrated. They perhaps, yes, it's done to my expectation, and this expects an improvement. So the product is to review and focus by the retrospect. Another best improving, and this is and improves the process you're using. Scrum Master holds a retrospect time boxed at 1 to get our retrospect is 2 hours. A lot of things to talk about. I mean, to a team that's perhaps, but the Scrum Master after the demonstration, it's attended, not customers if they sit in, but generally it's the team member identify what worked well, and what could or should be improved. You want to, if you've got a huge to improve, you look for the highest value thing to improve on that, and you add that to your product back. If that's the appropriate, it's just an agreement on how you're going to use. So you agree on what improve how everyone is, and it inspects and improves the process. And then the team roles, as I've mentioned a number of team roles. There's really 3 team roles in Agile: the owner, the Scrum Master, and the team members. The product owner is responsible for the product backlog and represents the customer and works. Now, in some cases, it's available. The customer might come to meetings too. When we were building the tool, we had a line in any day to any stand-up meeting, started attending all of the planning sessions. But the product owner, in the absence of customer representative, the Scrum Master takes the team meetings and removes impact. Significant role is they should be a servant leader who gets in there and says, this, you want the team to choose the work. The Scrum Master really to be productive. And for planning the iterations that can be completed each, demonstrating the capabilities at the end of each iteration. And it's very empowering for teams. This finished working on, isn't it cool? Teams ideally are 5 to 9 members. developers, testers, and other roles. Engineers, could be architects, as needed. But there's a lot of data behind for your team size based on among people. So in the other example, besides the bike share, when I was building a car week, Joe invited in from the state of Washington office, and Washington, they're starting to use Agile practice projects, and this was toward the end of 2014, and been doing this for over a year. And in that year, they instituted Agile Fridays, where Agile practices were shared, something like my talk to you today. So they're still available online. You can go listen to them. Joe is one of their speakers, and they recorded them and posted them there, and it's available. One of the things that I resonated with on their website is it talks about Agile practices. Organizations deliver customer visible. Around the world, Agile allows public to in smaller increments, making customers happier by responding quickly to change and maintain happier, more productive product teams. And that really resonates with me, is it's with the team, their work, and they feel like they're making a contribution. If their customers, members are happy, there's a lot of data on the quality of the software, reduce substantially, increases productivity. We've measured it in the Bowen Company, really improves. And so you've got happier employees that happier customers. Good, it's a win-win all the way around. A little more information. They also, I gave Michael a call to see how things are going. It's been a couple years. And he said that they actually trained their contract personnel to become certified Scrum. In the process, they looked at what they could improve the way they do business. So they were able to reduce the time to get a vendor on their online purchase agreement from 18 months to 1 month for vendors to be online. So that's pretty remarkable, and there's a link to that story too. He also said that we're looking at manager support, Agile contracting, and I listed the authors. It's published by Wiley in 2013. So they're using that book to inform them on how to write their RFPs and perhaps develop checklists to assess their committed to them. I asked him if he had anything he could share with this group today, and he said they're not quite there yet. So, but perhaps within the. So if you are a supplier who's recommending the top looking for Scrum Masters, product owners, the artifacts at a minimum should be a product backlog, iteration backlog, and working demonstratable increment of capability produced on a regular basis. Significant within Boeing, the 5 levels of planning. Communication and planning in an Agile effort, you should have the vision and roadmap up front, perform iteration every 2 to 4 weeks, have a daily stand-up every day. At the end of your iteration, have iteration demonstration and retro. And I believe that brings me to the end, and I'm if you do have questions about what I've just briefed, I do recommend you ask them now, because it builds on all of these concepts I've just presented.
We have several questions online. Let's get to one. Stephen Matthew, you've had your hand raised since this conversation, so I'm going to. Oh, okay, your hand is down, Stephen Matthew, but I see Steve Hancock does have his hand raised. So, Steve, I'm going to ask Carrie Fogel's question first. She entered it We will unmute you next and allow you to ask your question. We'll ask, and of course now I just lost it. Okay, would you ask your question? Go ahead, ask your question for just 1 second.
Just very quick, relative to ideas that kind of struck me. Are these presentations available through Connect?
I don't think they are currently, but I could certainly put.
Next week or whatever.
Yeah. Simon, you want? Do you have your transportation working group Connect location for the charts?
Adding these slides to the TWG Connect site and also up audio to our YouTube.
Great.
We've managed to lose the questions off our screen. So if you just give us, oh, here we are. Here we are.
Okay. Sorry about that. Carrie Fogel asked a question. Key elements that should be included from the beginning. The bike example did not performance requirements.
I think my second add in more detail.
And Carrie had a Callie had a very right scope of work that would allow this flexibility. When agencies want to pay fixed prices, the iterations there are.
Really? So we're actually kind of looking at Agile contracting. I haven't read the book. Michael recommended it to me, so I'm going to read that now. I think it'll give us some more guidelines, but essentially, well, for instance, example I've been, that was an IDIQ contract, which is kind of you have a pot of money and a scope of work, and so we were able to work it easily, and at times the customer asked us to do something different than demonstrate that, and that was within scope. You could kind of do a trade-off. Well, if you want me to do this instead of that, is that higher priority? So that's you work on a budget over a certain period of time, accomplishing as much scope as possible. For a while, you'll measure a velocity, and you'll be able to estimate how much you can get done before the budget. And the customer can help you prioritize the highest priority work that needs to be completed. Jesse.
Can we return to that when we get into the discussion at the end? Important question.
Yeah, you bet.
And we have another question mentioned was risk. And from a contractual risk built into the planning, the worst case scenario, and move forward. So does Agile recognize risk in a different way?
We address risk every day in our daily stand-up meetings, and so identifying areas of complication and risk, that risk on a regular basis. So the next presentation goes into concepts when you've got multiple parallel, and then the role of the system engineer and how important that role is. And in some cases, if one team identifies a complication that then impacts another team, then perhaps that's a risk that needs to be brought to the program level and addressed. So risk is really embedded with the Agile process. It's nice that there's risk, and risk items are brought up and dealt with on a regular basis. Yeah.
Okay, that was thank you, Emiliano Lopez, for that question on risk. Richard Denny has a question. What are the risks and demonstrations? Are the requirements also subject to iterative revision? Is there a formal verification in addition to review of the look and feel?
So yes, requirements are an important part of the process in the Boeing company as well. So, but real presentation will answer some of these questions. Essentially, the concept is within your iteration, you're not just developing code, you're also analyzing requirements, performing detailed design, developing code, running the test, and doing your so that you've got your traceability every iteration to the code you just wrote. That drives quality into your product every iteration. And we were doing that on one project. It was actually a team of experienced software engineers and analyzing already developed code to prepare documentation to take before the FAA for. So we were every iteration analyzing requirements, doing the detailed design, running the tests in the lab, doing and producing our traceability tables as well. And at the end of each sprint or iteration for that team, we were working to 1-month sprints, and we had demonstratable artifacts that were prepared to take before a board. But we were working one significant capability at a time, which helped work quickly. It was remarkable. It would be a hard job, but they worked very productive together doing it. So does that answer that question?
So for now, Phyllis, so what we're going to do, questions logged in the question, we're going to save those presentations to the next presentation, and then we'll have some time for dialogue.
Okay, thank you. So a lot of these questions, as we Agile practices side of aerospace, we had, and so defining what does it mean to the system engineer, the role of system engineering, and how can we work more effectively to build high-quality systems using Agile practices as well. The working group I'm a member of is the Agile Systems and Systems Engineering Working Group. It was started in the fall of 2000. Meeting was at the IW 2013, where a number of us got together to address what's the role of system engineering when they're working with a team of software developers that are using Agile practices. Much of the content that I'm going to show you today, during 2013, primarily these 4 individuals wrote the paper, Systems Engineering Projects Using Agile Methods. It was an International Symposium in 2014. You can see that we're all companies, but we all worked with applying Agile practices and saw the need for defining the system engineer's role on these teams. And so this paper, I think it's also being proposed that will go into more detail to present to you. In this presentation, so the previous presentation really was just deck, and I talked through the different ceremonies associated with Agile. So I'll just in systems engineering from our INCOSE handbook, and actually I think I took this from version 3, but hopefully it's still the same in version 4. Disciplinary approach and means to enable the realization of successful systems. So, and we all want successful systems, right? And our systems are becoming more and more complex and more interconnected. So the focus of systems engineering in support of in this paper. So actually, there's a number of engineering roles defined in the handbook, but we just focused on the one of these 6. So the technical in our paper are definition, requirements analysis, architectural design, implementation, and verification. So those as they relate to rather than all the others. So essentially, this definition maps to the beginning top left of the V. The requirements analysis then maps to the lower level in the V. Architectural design is the bottom of the V. Implementation is, and then integration and verification side. And so I'm sure you're all familiar with those. So in the Agile framework, which is what the author, and I coined our terminology, framework changes. There are some changes to some engineering roles. One of the enablers for doing incremental and is your architecture, and the recommendation is modular, and it should have the ability, and so change it. I'll go into more detail with the changes to the process. So you're not doing iterative and incremental goals. So the system engineer, look at the V systems in the end, and then you something else. When system engineering involves teams in an Agile team, really levels across the process, but they're really involved in maintaining, defining, helping architecture and doing the trace to the test requirements and maintaining your artifacts, your information, and all as needed for deliverables. Time. So if you're maintaining it as a full set of defined has just been completed. So talk a little more about the system engineering and architecture. The SE should architecture and update that architecture representation within a tool, for instance. Participate. Well, you system engineers on every team. Those engineers work together to maintain the integrity. So implementation teams and size and complexity of the product in development, system engineers may be working one iteration so that when the team is ready, requirements have really been analyzed at an appropriate level. Well, I'll describe that a little, talk through. In the process, you want your system engineers and team members to work, find those capabilities, implement, test them, inspect the capabilities as needed, and essentially, it's not like, well, I did my part, you got to figure out the rest of it, or you got to do the test. Everybody owns the product, the working product. Done till it's fully tested, and product. The system engineers, the developers, on large, I have several teams working in parallel. Really important to have system engineering with them under those circumstances. If you don't have system, frequently what we'll find is a software developer filling that role. Development, requirements design, verification, revisited throughout the development life. Rather than doing a whole bunch of left side of the V and a whole bunch of testing on the right, doing it throughout as so to represent it with this diagram. If we were to go back, I think I'd put the planning team all across that. So There's some pre-planning that your vision and your roadmap, making sure you've got your prioritized product ready to go. Iteration 1, your planning for simultaneously and identify dependencies active to project that big. And that there's an architecture team, but you'll notice that there's a figure shown in row 2 because you're on your implementation. And what this picture is imply is that you could have multiple teams. That's why there's multiple stacks. And there were iteration backlog those periods of time. So iteration 1 at iteration and maybe more before the releasable product. Enough product in development, multiple teams work, then you need time where they all come together and testing. Now what we found in integration and test, take those developed and demonstrate, integrate them together, so you start testing continuous integration. So that's a team. They're taking products and they might be working iteration at where it was originally, but as soon as a product module is ready to want to start testing as soon as possible. That's kind of in a nutshell what's going on. Represents that kind of sequence alignment of teams working together. A key part of this planning sessions at the beginning of each demonstrations and retrospections at the end. And then you do a similar beginning of each release where iterations are planned. It's your intention to have a potential at the end of release 1, which is at the so those in more detail in the previous, and the intention so that in development who's on the team. So every team has a product owner members. They might also be stakeholder representatives, important members to have a planning team for sure. You also has masters. They may not stakeholder, but they could, and implementation teams and integration and testing comes in down under the team members, intended to just show examples that might be on teams in development. So, so for the most part, you might have your chief architect, for instance, team and your architecture team, but for implementation teams. System engineers that are also on the also in your implementation teams. The purpose for this chart. And then we went into detail in the paper for a work product who's a team, who's consulted in the table. And this is intended to show that depending on development, as you're working, you have multiple that are being maintained, and it's different artificial teams. So the planning team, depending on who your customer is, if you're building a satellite system, might be interested in you satisfying requirements, but if you've got a set of requirements, so so you might, you've got your scope being maintained, being maintained, and then a typical set of architecture team might maintain a concept of operations, architecture team is probably better for main planning team because those are more like types. Trade studies to maintain your long-term viability. You're looking at, you know, our system that's becoming obsolete and we need to move. That kind of long-term vision, maintaining your product is responsible for. And then your team, this could be developing software as well as detailed design, as well as performing verification to you as you test. And test team has their the intention of those tables, and it's really just an example. My different products in development and its expectations and the working in. Challenges with traditional system engineering. Are we doing okay? So I will just tell you, this paper, it was we all wrote this part first. As we've all experienced the challenge, we were hoping to come up with the challenges. I just want to make sure I do due diligence on this. More content in the paper in these areas. But we talked about lack of rapid response. So if you're doing analysis up front, you get into implementation, answer your question, it's really hard to build the right thing. System engineering embedded with the team is that. Essentially, I'm doing a not implementable. It's not very, so you know, I've gotten into this conversation with me. You need that more defined that, but it sets the agreements. That's so important. The time up front to reach those agreements, where very important to, if somebody's acting responsibilities. You need an architecture up front, but it needs so that you get into you understand your boundaries within those boundaries. And then your interpretation, similar to what I mentioned about the response. If you requirements, somebody's there to answer forward your details, then that, and that costs, and we're trying to, and requirements, I think this was so development. So when management tool with the radio is interoperable, a lot of information are kind of similar abuse and and we had to build those. So how we, so these qualities or quality, reliability, sustainability, what we did, tested as much as possible so that we were products and non-functional requirements testing. So that's highly recommended. And then, so this risk earlier, essentially these levels where you're doing planning often, what you just learned, the ability to more rapidly. So it gives you the ability to change in complexity more, not waiting for a formal change. You can almost turn those planning sessions, change, review, and validation and test by moving to your iteration, verifying potentially more often. So in conclusion, software development working together to develop iteratively is what, and many starting to use all across, not you want architecture and requirements prior to the beginning, and frequently requirements are the what you should, not necessarily the software requirement in software. Leave to the teams on how, because they're the experts, they can find planning are essential to the teams. Releasing products frequently, so you've got something different. There's, I don't know, reports and they software is developed that's necessary. So what this allows you to do, the software you need sooner and develop any of that. So that saves money. So you finish your project. You want to absorb changes to your mission, include requirements architecture validation by system engineering projects. So working parallel. So these are the types of that you might ask your during a supplier and their proposed Agile practices. Do you expect to have discovery development that will cause changes? Are involved and commit a customer or product owner that can product backlog? So if you're up to multiple suppliers and you're think about how are you going to be to your contract? Answer those kinds of questions. If they're going to, can the person at the planning and demonstration track? This is a list of requirements that I recommend, and I cite reports in learning more about it.
Plenty of time. Thank you for that overview. We have, I'm going to go back to the question that we didn't get resolved on your set of slides, and that is in Hung, and she wanted facts.
Oh, well, go to my table, example of artifacts, and initially, so the co-authors that are going through this table, all this says team member. Initially, we had all those roles in this table in that chart, and realized that that level of definition kill, because frequently there's one individual in many of those jobs, right? So that's why team member, and that's more in keeping with terminology and the concept that the whole team. So the article, here's an example, the planning that they own, for instance, the scope of work, the technical management, and a lot of these terms we actually, in INCOSE handbook, that's for at a planning level. This requirements articulation, it's product capability. So at the big ticket items, and then your requirements management, you define those big ticket, manage on that. If you decide, I'll go back to the management tool of the radios. Army customer said, well, I'll tell you a little later, you know. Jesse laughs, but that's a big deal. The frequencies, what's the interface? So getting, and we actually, so on constant, one of the radios late, because we were working iteratively, allowed us to do that. So we started all of our software a year before it was So when we got into formal qualification, we finished a day early. It was between, so of course it's when nobody was, and we got finding in those 3 weeks. So it's very effective, this particular project. And the meeting facilitator is your Scrum Master. So that's an example of artifacts, but the architecture team artifacts are specific to system engineering. Trade studies, for instance, and your concept of operation log. So when I say that, we have something in the paper we go a little bit. Oh, I talked about a little bit. If you've got, you're maintaining your architecture, and that could include transitioning from one to another because setting one and they no longer. So that's the kind of thing be I to gone because we on Java version we had to. So okay.
Good. So we have a whole list. We're going to be perfect for some great. After we get through, maybe we can, and a lot of rich questions in here.
Sure. Everybody, and good afternoon on the East Coast. I have colleagues on the phone. Mackie's listening, so you're fine. Okay, so we're going to touch on this. The Rule 940.u federal oversight for federal aid. That it provides oversight to federally funded projects to make sure including conducting. So make sure that ITS project has a in some form of. That's the main reason why we rules. Essentially, to board it into the V diagram, we're formal as to do fit and function objectives. And in a nutshell, trying to help our public partners. What is it trying to do with this project? Limits of your solution. Well, the project worked. Bottom line, it's very simple, but that was in the detail. We've seen various in the past with the publication. This is, Phyllis went into this a little bit, a little nickname, of death. A lot of publications they see this and they because it gets in the way of getting in their mind. We'll more later. This is a spiral process. This is a early development. A lot of times we hear from public agencies that your V process spiral method. I hear that as code words. I want to do what I want to do. The bottom line, the way I respond to them, they both have concept of. You do not get to process. You still need to do concept of. In listening to Phyllis talk, this is backlog, which is agile development. It's the same thing. So in the view of depth built into it, the fundamental cube spiral or agile is just beginning start architecture, feasibility, exploration, and putting that doesn't change. Start off with any project, if you do not have a good grasp of what is, I don't care what process you use, it's going to end up on my top 10 list. So again, you take the V and you start off on day one, your objective and goals. Again, create that backlog. That is the ultimate. If you messed up on creating that backlog and operation, I found the most useful applying system engineering for a more generic process. Sometimes it's the spiral, sometimes the sawtooth, is the actual agile method. I rely on the ability to trace from your finding the concept of operation into every single requirement, into every single. If there are changes in the process of change in a design, I want to know how that and how that impacts the original objective that you're trying to do. And a lot, you need to, if you do your traceability correctly, fine, you can identify other requirements that are also going to be impacted. And I'm going to I'm going to touch on done already to do that. You have, in a way, this is a in the overall system engineering documented at Federal Highway Administration. We've always looked at change management. What we need to do is build the change management plan and the system engineering management project with certain assumptions on the process. Find out that there are going to be iterative or spiral type process to get. You need to be able to check the process on the fly. We have not done a very good job of that administration to show people how that can be done. Again, a lot of this goes back to what Phyllis have talked about, beginning parameters and limitations. You're going to need to do some trade-offs. Every single project document, there has been times when you need to trade off something. Without that initial information, you're not going to. So start off, the first example of research project for smart truck parking. This is, as most of the ITS projects that we're involved, we have a combination of software and, so it's not a strict, none of these are strictly, so that's part of the, now the goal of this is the research project to help identify parking spaces at, so they can meet their duty time requirements that the FMCA. We know, I'm not really sure how to, one of those cases, and Phyllis, you probably experienced this also. This is a heavy-based design project. The back and the sensors are relatively for the truck driver to accept. The user interface has to be suitable for them and safe driving rules. We start off with this with a lot of ambiguity. Now, in normal federal aid process, with that much ambiguity, you're never going to make it past the walkthrough. So this is a example. Work?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the user need, and we track with system need. Now, and I'm seeing this more and more documents I review, we're starting to use the system here. Okay? System will save your butt. Okay? Into that in a little bit, but again, you look at some of the This is very generic. A lot of functionality in there. And here we go. We spawn up into high level, and then you have the parent, the descendants with increasing level of detail, prioritize these requirements, and we also identify other system needs that satisfy. This is a complete traceability chain. The interesting is this: if you have they don't have the tool to do this. Everybody has Excel. My phone has Excel. This is the requirement. Okay, now we started off with the initial set of parents requirements, and we number descendants based on that requirement. Again, you can see the level of detail and definition. Now, in the project, we added additional requirements, and then, as you can see, we just the genealogy of this. This tells you exactly where it's from. It provides you just look at what that requirement is support. This is where that is a very simple thing. We start using that on a regular basis. Pull your butt out of the fire. Okay, because we've seen people adding requirements on their system, and if you are keeping your finger crossed, it's related to something on your project. Okay, now the San Diego ICF. This is a huge project. We have multiple interface to multiple testing brand new software technology in decision support systems. We rely on the system that we use. Now down here, that is V. Yes, you can check yourself with the V process here literally. We have well-defined each of the micro iteration at 2 weeks. Iteration 1, post iteration 2, and notice how it goes. Iteration 3, acceptance test at the very end. This is not exactly an agile development process. Spiral is sort of a mishmash of lots, but we're adaptable enough to produce for developers the flexibility they need, and the on our end, it's a balancing act. And this is also the requirements. Again, don't lock yourself in just because the last example was 1.1, 1.11. That's not at CAT. San Diego, you find a way that it works. Project management plan, your system engineering management plan. So for our role is we need to integrate traceability into every step of our wait until the end of the project for a wholesome document to be delivered to us. Project. We have to start dealing with traceability from. Don't accept any document for the project, because if they are iterative or spiral type development, that expect those documentation to change. Have them deliver to you a new set, single micro iteration. That's non-productive. But have access to whatever they're using. Changes that's happened. If they don't have that's a problem. Final thought. It is not a handicap to use. It has built-in flexibility. It is not the V of that. It's a framework discussion with your contractor. And challenge is this: as we get into connect the vehicle, the level of complexity increasing, possibly without using some type of system in those projects involving those type of get off the ground, or you may fail and idea why you even failed. Okay.
Great. So we have 25 more. Jesse and Phyllis to come back up here. Ed, if you want to stay here as well. We're now transitioning to 25 minutes of Q&A discussion.
I'm going to stand.
But I'd like to get all of you on the way.
Oh, I see.
You can take a seat, Ed.
Okay.
We can get you all on there. Pretty good.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
Nice and cozy.
No pun intended.
Okay, great. So, Ed, we'll just roll right into these. Nicholas Rena had a question. Could you discuss some of the key considerations using a project management plan, SEMP, and/or change management plan with Agile? When is a good time to have a first draft of these?
That's an interesting question. I want to, if a project gets approved and gets kicked off, I want to see it as soon as possible. Because I would be relying on what's in the project management plan and the system engineering to give me some idea of how the concept of operation or the project backlog. I want to know what process you plan to go into and what are the decision gates on making certain decision on how the project gets deployed, how changes are going to be managed. So I want to see that. And usually when I review this stuff, I look for a sign that it's a boilerplate, where basically you take a boilerplate document, search and replace. I usually send that back.
Good. Good. Yeah, please.
Some of us doing ITS projects has a thesis in engineering guidebooks and documents. Enforced already covered. What's being done now to maybe adjust them to discuss how Agile can be used with V, and then maybe train some of the agencies in the past that Agile is a valid method to use in conjunction with V.
So before you answer, let me repeat the question so the people on the phone can hear.
Sure.
So I'll try to summarize. Given the fact that we have an ITS guidebook, what's being done in order to update that guidebook to accommodate Agile practices, and is there any training forecast to train on those changes?
I'll take laser. Dan is politely saying that the system engineering guidebook hasn't been updated in too many years, and developments, Agile being one of several that have emerged since then. The short answer is we're talking about how to go about doing that. We don't have a definite plan yet. To some extent, it will depend on what our colleagues around the country want to do as well. But so I don't have an answer for the second question, but the primary question is really a comment. And yes, things have changed in the system engineering field. How Agile meshes with the process that's well documented. What are the differences? Where does it have to change? Question that we as an ITS profession will have to deal with is oversight of this different process. How do we know when it's appropriate, first of all? How do we vet really need to do Agile here? How do we adapt some of the procedures to this new, more flexible environment? The issue that we have to deal with at federal highways level and city level as well. How do we execute change orders? Do we need change orders anymore? Heavily embedded in our institutions. So we definitely need more, no question about it, but it'll also trigger some actions. that, of this type. What do we do about change orders? Existing framework or change that framework?
That was a perfect segue into Callie Fogel, who complicated questions and really and that sort of stuff. So Callie, I hope you're on the. I'm going to unmute you so that you can ask your question and we can have some engagement. I hope you're ready and here, so we can all hear you and you're able to.
Okay, I work for LA Metro and I run the RIDS program in law. So one of my questions was, so maintain the development process given, even in there, people accessing one file, then be the maintainer. I had a follow-on question to that, is that how do you overload people that are, for example, my time. I'm one person and I have multiple contractors, so it's apart and review everything. So I would the people that to impart.
Yeah, let me try to take a crack at that. So, boy, you bring up difficult challenge as we transition from the V process. One of them is the management. For the first example that I use, it's relatively like Excel. Now, I'll be honest with you, it was not a pretty thing, but it worked, okay? We decided to use the Agile process after the project started. So much ambiguity in the way the needed that to track the evolution of the requirement. For larger and more complex projects, like San Diego, they had somebody that was a full-time managing that particular project for, not our agency, but San Diego. And the contractor recommended a couple of tools. INCOSE was one of them to track the stuff. And then they also used the open up process, the entire process, the system engineering process of the project. So those are just some example of something you can use. Now, the other point that you bring up is a workload issue. I don't have an easy answer for you on that. I personally am carrying around 3 major hats right now, administration. So I basically technically do 1.5 jobs, not counting everything else. So that is a ongoing. If you can, the only solution I see that in the short term, knowledge in your staff, and the people that you rely on, take some of the load off of you in the meantime. It's going to be a long. How do we deal with workload, especially when you're dealing with local projects? Almost every single publication out there are shorthanded. I'm sorry I don't have a more definitive answer on that last one.
Challenge with workload that you're one multiple projects that you're managing, and how do you balance the management support, Agile development, planning, and demonstration, Jeremiah?
That's just to be truthful. The challenge is when I have my projects that need to get through the Agile process. A lot of the stuff that we talked about today, right? I had a follow-on question that was related. Once it gets out, the work that we're management then has expectations of what will be delivered. Deliver that at that time because you might decide something else became more and then all required to deliver something that wasn't as important, told people that's what. So to figure out a way to make the process work as well within the agency. And it's because it's a very dynamic process.
It almost brings your management one of the stakeholders. They may not be a direct responsible. They are consultant form of any decision that's made. It may be useful to increase the level of communication with them. Management is willing to follow up communication.
The things about Agile is you push, create self-directed teams. So their role of response parameters within which they can make trade-offs, knowledge. But, I mean, if you're reporting up, as you know that there's not going to hit, but there's good reason to report that back up. Bring that person in to see the demonstration session so they're aware. And maybe there's the team to also know that date. They can kind of own their plan, the most knowledge that they need. So, yeah, I reemphasize communication through the levels that are concerned with your.
Awesome, thank you. Back to the room, we have another question in the room.
We have in general is potentially how do you make it happen? This not
Question was, have you reasons of success in implementing Agile processes in a place where accepted, and what can you do to demonstrate, especially if you're of authority?
Well, I can give you an example if you want. So the network management stuff worked on didn't have embedded system engineers on. They were doing all the requirements, and they were doing and every once in a while they'd come into our demonstration. Well, that's interesting, but they were not engaged in our. And actually, that experience was what kind of led me to get involved in finding Agile system engineering and working with the teams more closely. We were still able to be successful, but it was challenging. So how do you change? Is you've got to have executive support to encourage the transition. Then you've got to train and embedded coach that has experience with day-to-day questions when there's clashes. But we always used to do it this way. The culture change takes time. You just have to encourage the team to keep. Eventually, once the transformation happens, love it. We did this on our C17 teams, and we ran some videos of the team members. Oh my gosh, they'd never want to go back. So once they made the transformation, they love it. But transformation.
I would agree. Coaching, a lot of times what I've done in the resource center is I walk them through some of the steps to address a task that Phyllis just mentioned as a coach. For the smart truck park resistant. The type of traceability because they thought it was just addition. I ran across some of the a few years after getting toward that stuff stayed the vacant a couple of times. Back to find out what they ran to impact it and make it a trade-off to traceability. Another method that from first string, so we have a little bit of can and cannot do, but what we try to do is we restore. I come in, a lot of times I show that project.
Yeah, exactly. So just because you throw out all the system engineering best practices,
Yeah.
because in maintaining the integrity of the product.
Yep. Important. And probably the ever used one time, just once, to deliver a free public affairs for a group that was refusing to use system engineering. So when your project dies, this is how you.
And that's the other data in the chaos report is fail. And you would think that the numbers, they're not that much better.
Yeah.
But projects that use Agile practices are successful. And in fact, Joe, the guy, went and talked to, what's that big that they have in Europe every year? Yeah, he went and talked about, well, we ought to start an investment. Only companies that are using Agile practices use their ability to be successful investment strategy. I thought, man, my investment portfolio. I'm sorry.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that great answer. So, phone, we have a question from Ruben Weiss. I hope you're listening. I see you're still on the line, Mike, and I'd love you to ask your question. Where did you go? There you are, about safety critical systems.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. I'm still. The Agile a little bit more speedy. How does it work? Safety critical software. Have you got any experience in the SIL level requirements? You do that before you start your. How do you deal with that?
I'll tell you that we've applied Agile safety critical software development, and it just means that levels of testing is built in. So essentially, as your test suite includes this safety test to the boundaries and all the artifacts, trace available for evidence.
Yep. So for
that is true.
Backlog on the attributes in the test set. So you're testing constantly against those attributes.
Yeah. So for federal government parlance, concept of operation, as we define the needs that you've identified through that process, safety critical, and you prioritize them and you apply the necessary level of attention to those accordingly.
Exactly.
There's 2 questions down there. Okay, great. Okay, good. So we have some questions in the room, so we'll turn to the room. I think, Kenneth, you had a question? So the question is, how do you use the priority of the requirement in the Agile development?
Well, so found is we'll do feature-based tests the requirements are a many-to-many relationship to the you know, one example I'll give is you might have the requirement to log the data for everything you're developing. So you've got that, but it drives every component that's in development. So doing feature-based testing helped us show that. So some of the requirements, I guess what I'm trying to say, every backlog item includes some aspect of meeting that requirement within it as part of the details of what the definition of done is. Prioritize. That's actually part of the hard part about defining what is your minimum viable product that you're going to demonstrate for each release or iteration. Sometimes for figure out that minimum viable product to build, and so that kind of ties into the what is prioritize those requirements. And frequently I'll start with the architecture. You know, so for this architecture, where do we start? And for that component or part of the architecture, does it satisfy? I don't know if you want to.
Well, that's one of the enticing things is it goes into creating a custom operation for
yeah.
backlog parts, because you have the product owner or stakeholders that have to prioritize what they want to accomplish. Versus you have legacy systems, especially in our space, that where they provide critical functions. Right, you got to find a way to balance that. And what we end up doing during the course of the project, we will use the trade-off guide. What do we need to try? We run into a problem with this. We've got limited time and resource available to fix this problem. If we drop this, how is it going to impact? If it's a low priority item, turn it loose. Go back and focus on the high priority item. Then you can have a roadmap on what you need to trim to get back on track.
Okay, awesome. So we have two more questions in the room. Shamara, is it a quick question? Okay, so let's do a quick question, and okay, and then we'll do a little bit of wrap up. Okay, so one last.
My question is about hardware. Everything Agile available to be software focused, but there are techniques that people use for hardware. How do you relay that? Because if you go to like a hardware project, Agile doesn't really work because it automatically goes straight to the sort. How much involvement or how much is going to be done about hardware?
Yeah, so the question, just to summarize, the question was, how does Agile work when in the hardware world?
So I can give you an example. We were building some satellite systems, and our boards were kind of on 3-month iterations, while the software was on 1-month iterations, and then we would bring them together for an integrated hardware and software testing. And well, like built a car, where we were backlog, and we brought on the motor. Who I was working on the wheel, but we're working on different. But then it all came together, you know. How much is about actually most about the thought? Not if there are any or examples or case studies out there. There's a few. A lot. You're right. We don't want to do.
We don't need specific experience. If I was Silicon Valley, see a lot of these guys on Kickstarter doing this stuff. So using Agile, things together.
Awesome. reached 12. Do you wrap up statement?
A couple of quick comments. To reiterate, we are in a world of technology, the public, political environment. We need to be open-minded, using the right tool, the new challenge. We are not in saying that adopt Agile. Policies being here is an effort to make you aware of what's out there, what tools, what are out there, how they should be assimilated. The second comment I'd like to make is, again, saying a big word of thanks to my new colleagues on the program here, and some of the people behind the camera as well. It's been a pleasure working with you, and you've done a great job. I think a lot of useful information and thoughts as well. So thank you.
Hi, and this is Jean Souza, and Phyllis started the presentation, people and interactions, and that's what it was. I've got to say, thank you all for coming to the great event. Transportation Working Group, that Federal Highway Administration, ITS California, and I think that's win-win-win for everybody, and when that good. Go back to 11 assignments had the
I can't.
Okay.
I think I should put on the left hand.
So if you're interested in the webinars that you have on this webinar, if you would like to see, just let us know, and we will work with you on that.
You're doing a follow-up mailing with those questions.
Great. And thank you very much. And the presentation and recording will be available on the YouTube channel. Thank you very much for coming. It was a great experience.